Part 1. The prison with no walls. There are things you've done that you can't take back, words that cut too deep, moments where you knew better, but didn't do better. People you loved, who now look at you differently, or not at all. Maybe it was a flash of rage. Maybe it was years of silence. Maybe it was a selfish decision that cost someone else their peace. And even if the world has moved on, you haven't. You carry it in your stomach, in your dreams, in the awkward pauses of your joy, that voice that always whispers, "Remember what you did." It's the prison with no walls. You're not handcuffed. You're not behind bars. But inside, you feel sentenced. Guilt is a silent architect. It builds slowly, with thoughts like bricks and shame like mortar. And before you know it, you've created a world you can't be free in, because you believe you don't deserve to be. So you wait. You apologize. You try to be better. You turn your pain into a quiet performance, hoping the people you hurt, or life itself, will notice and say, "All right, you've suffered enough." But they don't, or they can't, or their silence becomes its own punishment. And now, you're stuck in a loop. You can't forgive yourself because they haven't forgiven you. This is the lie that keeps millions of people chained to regret. You think freedom is something they must give you. You think redemption is earned through suffering. You think if you hurt enough, cry enough, change enough, someone will finally unlock the cage. But what if they never do? What if they never speak to you again? What if they died with that wound still open? What if they say, "I forgive you," but you still don't feel free? That's because real forgiveness has nothing to do with what they give you. It has everything to do with what you're willing to see in yourself. You can't forgive yourself until you understand yourself. Not just what you did, but why you did it. What was alive in you back then? What belief were you reacting to? What wound were you protecting? Because nobody ruins something they love unless they're hurting. And nobody sabotages themselves unless they're already convinced they don't deserve better. This isn't about excuses. This is about causation. And until you understand the root, you'll keep punishing the fruit. You'll keep dragging that guilt into your new relationships, your art, your laughter, your future, and wondering why it never feels real. Because deep down, you believe you haven't earned peace yet. But here's the truth that may unsettle you. Forgiveness isn't earned. It's awakened. It comes not from someone saying you're okay, but from you finally seeing that you're not the monster your guilt made you believe you were. Yes, you caused harm. Yes, you must take responsibility. But responsibility is not the same as eternal punishment. The moment you're willing to look at yourself honestly, to see the fear, the confusion, the brokenness that was moving through you at the time, that's when forgiveness becomes possible. Not because someone handed it to you, but because you reclaimed your right to heal. This isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finally understanding it deeply enough to stop letting it define you. And that's what this book is for. You don't need anyone else to free you. You just need the courage to walk into the prison you built and realize the door was never locked. Part 2. When guilt becomes your identity. There's a moment that happens after the damage is done. You've said you're sorry. You've tried to explain. Maybe you even made things right on the surface. But inside, something still clings to you. The guilt doesn't fade. It nests itself in your self-image. It rewrites how you see yourself. And slowly, without realizing it, you stop thinking, I did something bad, and start believing, I am bad. That's when guilt becomes something far more dangerous than an emotion. It becomes an identity. You start dimming your light like you don't deserve to be happy. You turn down opportunities, like success would be cheating karma. You distance yourself from love, as if being loved too deeply would mean you got off too easy. And here's the cruel part. The longer you wear that identity, the harder it is to let go of it. Because it starts to feel noble. You think suffering makes you honest. You think punishing yourself makes you righteous. You think if you just keep carrying the pain, you're proving to the world and to the person you hurt that you care enough. But brother, that's not justice. That's self-abandonment in disguise. There is no virtue in staying wounded once you've seen the truth and taken responsibility. There is no extra credit in dragging your pain into every tomorrow. Because when you hold on to guilt for too long, it stops being about the person you hurt and starts being about protecting your own shame. It becomes your emotional currency. It's what you exchange for safety. You say, look how broken I am. Please don't expect too much from me. Please don't get too close. And in doing so, you keep yourself from healing. Not because you can't, but because somewhere deep inside, you believe you don't deserve to. And here's where the lie gets even more twisted. When you're stuck in guilt long enough, you begin to fear letting go of it. You start to believe that if you forgive yourself, you're saying it never mattered. You're afraid that if you move on, it means you never truly cared. So you stay stuck, hurting yourself for what you did to someone else. But let me ask you this. How does staying small make it right? How does rejecting love make amends? How does keeping yourself miserable help anyone, including the person you hurt? It doesn't. That's not redemption. That's ego. That's the part of your mind that wants to stay in control by suffering, by hiding, by staying safely in the identity of the guilty one. But guilt was never meant to be a lifestyle. It was a signal, a teacher, a moment of awakening. And once you've learned from it, you're not meant to keep wearing it like a badge. You're meant to rise. You're meant to face yourself with mercy, to say, yes, I was unconscious, but I am no longer that man. Not because it erases what happened, but because you're not that version of you anymore. And if you don't let that truth in, if you keep clinging to the guilt to prove your worth, then your life becomes a monument to the past, instead of becoming the living proof that people can change, that people can grow, that even the one who made the mistake can become the one who heals others. But that transformation can't begin until you put down the identity of guilt, because you were never meant to live inside your punishment. You were meant to live through it and come out the other side with wisdom. And that wisdom, that clarity, is where real forgiveness begins, not as an excuse, but as an act of deep self-truth. Not to pretend it never happened, but to finally stop letting it define who you are. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. You are the one who saw it, who felt it, and who chose to become conscious. That choice alone makes you worthy of healing. So don't wear your guilt like armor. It's not protecting you. It's suffocating you. This is the part of the journey where you begin to take it off. Not because you've forgotten what happened, but because you finally understand it enough to let yourself live again. Part 3. The root of what you did. You didn't mean to become the villain in someone's story. No child dreams of growing up to betray trust, break hearts, or harm the people they love. But somehow, you did. And now you live with the aftermath. Not just what happened, but the question that haunts you quietly in the background. Why did I do it? You tell yourself it was weakness or stupidity, or you blame the pressure, the stress, the circumstances. But you know those are surface answers. If you really want peace, not just distraction, not just temporary numbness, then you have to go deeper. You have to stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What pain was I in that I didn't know how to speak? What belief was I carrying that made me think I had no choice?" Because every harmful act is born from a wound. And what you did was not some random, cruel explosion. It was a symptom of unprocessed pain, of unmet needs, of unconscious programming you didn't even know was running your life. Somewhere in your past, maybe in childhood, maybe in heartbreak, maybe in silence, you learned things like, "I'm not good enough unless I'm perfect. If I don't get love now, I may never get it again. If I show weakness, I'll be abandoned. If I say how I feel, no one will understand." These beliefs dig in deep, and they become the lens you see life through. So when you lashed out, lied, cheated, ghosted, exploded, or withdrew, you weren't thinking clearly. You were reacting to a reality shaped by fear, lack, and pain that wasn't even yours to begin with. That doesn't make it okay, but it does make it understandable. And understanding is the first step to healing. Because until you see the root, you'll keep punishing the branch. You'll keep calling yourself a monster for fruit you grew from seeds you didn't even know were planted in you. Let's be real. You didn't betray them because you're evil. You didn't sabotage that relationship because you hate love. You didn't shut down because you enjoy hurting people. You did those things because something inside you had been hurting for a long time. And when the pressure built up, it exploded in the only way it knew how. That's causation. Not an excuse. Not a bypass. A clear-eyed reckoning with the truth that you didn't know how to do better, because no one ever taught you how. That doesn't mean you're off the hook. It means you're finally holding the hook in your hands, instead of just feeling it buried in your back. Now you can choose. Now you can look at the fear, the story, the programming, and interrupt the pattern. You can say, "That version of me acted out of unconscious pain. But I'm not unconscious anymore, and I refuse to live as a reaction to my past." Because that's what true forgiveness is built on. Not denial, but deep self-recognition. You want to forgive yourself? Then you need to understand yourself better than anyone else ever did. You need to be the one who says, "I know where that came from, and I'm the one who's going to stop it from repeating." This is how it ends. The generational pain, the personal shame, the recycled storylines that say, "You're just broken." No, brother. You were wounded. You were unprepared. But now, you are awake. And the one who sees the root becomes the one who holds the power to plant something new. Part 4. You don't need permission to be free. Most people never forgive themselves, not because they don't want to, not because they're not sorry, but because they're waiting for someone else to tell them it's okay. You've been taught that forgiveness is something you earn, like a badge from someone else's approval. That you're not allowed to let go of guilt until the person you hurt says, "I forgive you." So you sit there, stuck, trying to be good enough, trying to be sorry enough, trying to suffer in just the right way, so they'll finally release you. But here's the truth. No one can give you freedom. Not really. Not fully. And the longer you wait for it, the deeper you sink into your own self-rejection. Let's go even deeper. Some people won't forgive you. Not because they're evil, but because holding it against you makes them feel safe. Your pain proves that their pain matters. Your suffering becomes their compensation. If they let go, it might feel like betrayal of their own hurt, or like justice was never served. And so the loop continues. You punish yourself. They keep their walls up, and nothing ever heals, just hardens. But brother, their forgiveness was never the point. Forgiveness isn't something you wait to receive. It's something you realize. Real forgiveness is seeing clearly and choosing to stop holding yourself hostage to a version of you that no longer exists. It's not selfish to stop punishing yourself. It's not cold. It's not dismissive. It's holy. Because when you forgive yourself, you're not saying it didn't matter. You're saying, I've learned, I've changed, and I won't keep dragging shame into a life I'm trying to live with truth. The idea that you must wait for permission to heal, that's the trap. That's the lie. That's the silent agreement that's been keeping you stuck in your past, even while the world moves on. Let me speak to your soul for a second. You're allowed to forgive yourself, even if they never forgive you. You are allowed to grow, even if they're still stuck in pain. You are allowed to be free, even if they don't understand how much you've changed. Because real forgiveness happens between you and your Creator, between you and the truth of who you are now. No one can stand between you and your healing unless you let them. So stop asking for a permission slip that no one else has the authority to sign. This isn't about earning worth. You were already worthy, even when you were lost, even when you were unconscious, even when you fell short. That's the divine mystery of grace. It doesn't arrive when you're perfect. It meets you in your mess and reminds you that the truth of who you are is always waiting beneath the pain. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to release you is the moment you realize you were never truly trapped. You were just holding the key, too afraid to use it. And now, you're not that man anymore. The one who acted out of fear. The one who didn't see clearly. The one who didn't yet know how to love or lead or speak or stay. That version of you is gone. But the one reading this, he's awake. And it's time for that man, this man, to stop asking the past for permission and start walking in the freedom that's already his. Part 5. Becoming the one who is free. You've carried this weight for long enough. You've stared at the past until your vision blurred. You've asked the questions, sat with the shame. You've blamed, replayed, regretted, and begged. But now, the story shifts. Because forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a becoming. You don't just decide one day to stop feeling guilty and magically feel clean. You become the kind of person who no longer needs to carry guilt in order to prove their growth. That means you start walking differently. You speak with clarity, not apology. You show up to the world, not from penance, but from presence. You're not pretending it never happened. You're not asking to be seen as perfect. You're choosing to let who you are now speak louder than who you were then. That's real forgiveness. It's not soft. It's not sweet. It's power, reclaimed from your own past. And yes, that will feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been living in guilt for so long that it started to feel like home. But guilt was never your truth. It was a teacher. It was the fire that burned down who you weren't, so you could remember who you are. Homework, the letter you were never given. This is a sacred practice. You're going to write a letter from the highest part of yourself to the version of you who made the mistake. Don't write from shame. Don't write to punish. Write from truth. Write as if your soul finally saw why you did it and wants to speak to that scared, hurting version of you that didn't know better. Begin with these words. I see you now, and let it flow. Tell that version of you what they were afraid of, what they didn't understand, what they were unconsciously protecting, and how you've grown since then. This is not a letter of excuses. It's a letter of sacred understanding, the kind that finally allows you to release the version of you that's no longer needed. When you're done writing, speak it out loud. Let your own ears hear the sound of your freedom. Then, if you feel ready, burn it. Let the flames carry the old story. Let the smoke rise like a signal to the universe. I'm no longer carrying what I've already learned from. A final word for the one who stayed until the end. If you made it this far, it means something inside you is already healing. You've stopped looking for someone else to save you. You've stopped begging for redemption. And now, you're standing in it. Not because you were perfect, but because you were honest. You faced yourself. You felt the fire. You didn't run. And that, brother, that is what changes everything. So here's what I ask. If this journey cracked something open in you, don't keep it to yourself. There is someone else out there, right now, trapped in guilt the way you were, waiting for a permission slip to live again. Be the mirror for them. Share your freedom. Speak what you've seen. Because the world doesn't need more people performing perfection. It needs people who have been to hell and chose to come back with light in their hands. You don't need to wait anymore. You've already walked out of the prison. Now it's time to live like someone who knows the door was never locked. Welcome home,